Hi, I'm Chris Bailey from C. Bailey Film. Today I'm bringing you this tutorial with CG Cookie. We're going to be making really easy flames using Blender. Now don't forget to check out CG Cookie, where we've got more videos on animating flames without using simulations. You can find the links in the description of this video below. Okay, so we're going to be making easy fire. What do I mean by that? I mean, it's not going to be a simulation. It's just going to be model geometry that reacts in a way that looks like fire. We're going to be putting a shader on it and doing some really cool stuff to create some neat fire effects. You can use this across a whole wide range of different types of applications. So let's jump into it. First thing we want to do is make a candle, so we've got some kind of context to it. We're going to do a really simple one. I'm going to hit A to select all and X to delete, and then Shift A, and we're going to go over here to cylinder. Now I'm going to scale this up a little bit and grab Z and just bring it so it's resting on my ground plane there. And I'm going to right click Shade Smooth. This will get rid of that faceted look and make it look like a smooth object. I'm going to go into edit mode by hitting tab, and I'm going to get rid of the top and bottom faces. So I'm going to hit 3 on my of the numbers on the top of my keyboard. That will switch me to face mode. You can also just click up here between these, but if you use 1, 2, and 3, you can hop between them quickly. It's a nice little tip. I'm going to select that face, hit X and delete, and select faces. Come down here, X and delete faces. Now, we're going to take this edge. I'm going to go to edge mode or hit 2 on my keypad. Hold down Alt and click that top edge. That will select that full edge loop is what that's called. I'm going to hit E to extrude and S to scale, and I'm going to bring it right in. So I'm going to hit S to scale and bring this loop in just like so. And then I'm going to bring it down a little bit because, you know, like candles tend to like sag, like they kind of have like a little like a bowl shape inside them. So I'm going to bring this down, hit E again, S to scale, grab Z to bring it down a little bit more, E, scale, and grab Z just a tiny bit. So it's like kind of tapering off. And then right here at the end, I'm going to hit F3 to bring up my command search window, and I can type in any command I want. If I'm trying to figure out how to do something, this is a great way to pinpoint what the command is. So I want to go for grid fill. If I start typing that in, autocomplete will find it for me, and I can just hit return. And there we go. It's going to grid fill that final bit. Now the bottom, I'm going to hold down Alt again and select that ring. And I'm going to hit E to extrude and scale. And I'll bring it in. And I'm not too worried about the bottom, but I will just hit F3. And you can see that command, the last one I used, is still there. So I can just click it. Makes it really easy. Now I'm going to put on a subdivision surface modifier just to help smooth out this candle a little bit more. So I'm going to click on the wrench icon here for the modifiers, and I'm going to click on add modifier, and I'm going to find the subdivision surface modifier. There it is. I'm going to turn it up to 2 on my viewport levels, and to get rid of this sort of bowing kind of round shape, I'm going to go into edit mode and hit Control R to create a loop cut. Now, if you can't remember these hotkeys, you can always hit F3 and type them in. So I can type in loop cut there. So if I type in loop cut, I get a couple of options that pop up. And you can see right here, edge, Control E, loop cut and slide. And then way off to the right here, you have Control R. So off to the right is where you find the hotkey for a particular command. And then over here is how you can find it in the menu. So there's an edge menu here. If I go Control E, I can get access to that. Or I can hit Control R to just go straight to this command. So I'm going to do that, Control R. There it is, loop cut. And I can just grab one up near the edge here and Control R, grab one down near the base, and then maybe 2 more. This will just straighten it up even more for us, because the subdivision surface modifier is sort of rounding everything out. So the more edges you have that kind of line up, the more you'll have a straight edge between them. Let's go to make the wick. This is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to go into edit mode, go to vertex mode by hitting 1, select that center vertex, and then Shift S. This is a very awesome hotkey. Shift S is your cursor control menu. So I'm going to go cursor to selected, and that will put this little thing down here right at the vertex that I've selected. So it'll put it wherever, whatever it is you have selected, it'll put the cursor right there on top of it. And so we got that. Now, why is that important? The cursor is where new objects appear in your scene. So if I go Shift A, mesh, or go to the curve and select Bezier, I'm going to get a Bezier curve right where I want it, right there. Now I'm going to rotate Y 90 degrees. That'll pop that up. And then grab and Z, and I'm just going to line it up a little bit so that the bottom sort of touches. I'm going to scale it down a bit and just kind of get it so it looks to be the right size. Now, with the curve selected, I'm going to come down here to this curve tab, open it up, open geometry, and then right down at the bottom where it says depth, I'm going to drag this up, and that will round it out, make it have a bit of a tube shape. Now let's go ahead and make the flame. I'm going to go into edit mode with the curve selected. I'm going to select the top curve control point, and I'm going to Shift S cursor to selected. Then I'm going to leave edit mode, and I'm going to go Shift A, and we need to create some mesh here. Now the question is, what kind of mesh should we make? Well, we want to have kind of a tapering, curving flame sort of drop shape. And I'm actually going to create that by creating another cylinder. So I'm going to click cylinder, and I'm going to scale it down. And I'll grab it up a bit and go into edit mode, and I'll select the top and bottom face again and delete those. You can actually set, when you create a cylinder, you can tell it to not add these top and bottom faces, but I just haven't been doing that. First things first, let's go to edge mode, and I'll hit A to select all. We're going to bring these kind of closer together. So S to scale and Z, and it'll come down towards that center point. And that's because I've got right up here, this is the default, so you probably have this too, but the transform pivot is set to median point. You can see I have a lot of different types here, but it's transforming towards the median of all the points that are selected. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit, and I'll grab this top ring, hit E to extrude, and grab Z and S to scale, and we're going to kind of make this tapering shape. Another E to extrude, another S to scale, like so. One more, bring it right up, make this last one really small. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit delete on my number keypad, or the full stop on my number keypad, to zoom right in, to focus on this. And what I want to do is grid fill it. So we're going to hit 3, type grid fill, and then I'm going to select that centermost vertex, and I'm going to turn on proportional editing. Now, proportional editing is great. I'm going to hit G to grab and Z and move up, but then I'm going to start rolling my mouse wheel. And if you look in the top left, you'll see it says proportional size smooth 0.1799, and that number is going to get smaller and smaller. You can see this circle kind of begin to appear in my viewport, and as I roll my mouse, it gets smaller and smaller. So this changes the radius of effect of my grab. So by having proportional editing turned on, I can grab and sort of it'll affect everything around that single vertex. Everything else will start to move too, based on how big or small this circle is. So I'm just going to bring this up a little bit just to kind of round out the tip. All right, let's do the bottom. So I'm going to go into edit mode, alt click that ring, E to extrude, scale, turn off proportional editing, so you can see it was grabbing everything. Grab Z, maybe one more, scale, grab Z, and make something like that. And then F3 grid fill. Cool. Now with these bottom faces selected, now I'll turn on transparent view so you can actually see it. I'm going to hit Shift S, cursor to selected. That'll put the cursor right there in the middle of all those guys. Now I'll leave edit mode, back into object mode, turn off transparent. And I'm going to go, actually just right click and go to set origin to 3D cursor. So there we go. Another handy use of the 3D cursor. And I'm just going to line up this flame just right on top of the wick. Nice. Okay, I'm going to put a subdivision surface modifier onto this. And there we go, just to smooth it out. I'm also going to right click and shade smooth. Might set it to 2. And now this first step that we've completed, this is kind of the basic idea of creating this, this type of easy fire. So the first step, no matter what your fire is going to be, if it's a big fire, a small fire, is to model something that kind of looks like the fire you want. So actually creating like a still frame of the flame. And with this now, we can create a bunch of procedural effects on it to make it move and behave as if it really was a fire simulation. So let's get that going. We're going to create an empty. So Shift A and come down to empty, plane axis, and I'll just move it off to the side. We're going to use this in a minute, and I'm going to grab my flame and I'm going to add a new modifier. We're going to add where is it? We're going to add the displacement modifier. And I'm going to click right here for the texture for it to use. I'm going to click new to create a new texture. And at the moment, it's just a blank texture. but if you click this little button here, it says show texture in texture tab. It's just gonna zip us down to the texture tab. So you can click here or here, doesn't matter, same thing. Now the default is image or movie is the type for texture. And so it's wanting us to open an image or a movie file, which you could do, but we're just going to create some clouds. So I'm gonna click on clouds, and then I wanna change the size. So I'm gonna bring it up so it's a bit larger. You could start to see where this effect is going already. So I'll bring it up a bit, maybe 1.6, that looks pretty good. I might bring my depth up as well, maybe to 4. We can start there, and I'll go back over to my wrench, and I wanna take the coordinates from local to object, and this is where we're gonna use that empty. I'm gonna select that empty, just like so. And now the coordinates of how it places this displacement texture on our object is going to be affected by where this empty is located. This will give us the chance to allow it to like sort of, animate continuously without us having to set keyframes every time we want the candle to move. So we're going to select this, and I want this empty just to be traveling in one direction. So I'm going to have it travel up. And you can see as it moves up, it's going to change the noise pattern that's affecting our flame. So in order to do this simply so it just carries on forever, I'm going to click the Z value for the location of this empty under the Object Properties tab. And I'm going to hit the hashtag, type frame. This is like a shortcut, sort of a shorthand way of creating a driver in Blender. And a driver is a value that drives another value. So we're telling Blender to look at the frame number. Frame is a sort of built-in variable for drivers. So by just typing frame, Blender knows to look at the frame number. So right now the frame number is 1, but as I hit play, naturally the frame number is going to go up. And as it goes up, it's going to change the Z location. It's going to drive the Z location. So this object is going to move up as the frames progress. So it might be a bit fast. So I'm going to also put some math in here. So do multiply 0.1. Let's try that. And now if we hit play, you can see it's just going to keep going up forever. No matter how long my timeline is, it'll just keep going up, which will mean the flame will continually move in this way. Great. Let's click on our flame. Now we want to get rid of some effects. So right now you can see it's sort of like crossing at the top, and you get this kind of weird inverted look. So we can affect that by using the mid-level. So if we just drag this closer to 0, it'll get to a point where it won't do that anymore. So I'm going to keep my strength at 1 and my mid-level at 0.35. Now, it might be a little different for you because your scale might be a little different. You know how I scaled at the beginning. So everything's kind of based on the size of things. So everything might be a little bit different. So just play with it and adjust it to I based on your scene, and you'll get something I'm sure that you're happy with. Okay, so now we've got this flame. Now, if we wanted to speed this up, we've got a couple things we could do. We can come over to the texture. We could play with the size of this. Sort of the bigger it is, the larger... the more subtle these movements are going to be. If we go down smaller and smaller, you'll see we'll really get a lot of harsh movement. That's actually kind of cool. That looks pretty good. And the depth will create this sort of extra detail. You can see the sort of ridges that we're getting. If I turn this down, it's going to smooth out. So that's another way of adjusting kind of the overall effect. Now, if we want to change the overall speed of the effect, we can go and affect the driver. So we can come over here to our empty, and we can change what we're multiplying by. So instead of by 0.1, maybe we do 0.3. That will make it move a lot faster. Probably a bit too much there. But I'm going to keep mine at 0.1. I think it looks pretty good. And maybe scale Z a little bit to elongate it up. But you can see you just keep hitting play and kind of tweak it as you go while it's animating. It's kind of nice. Okay, let's make some materials. So I'm going to switch to my shader editor. I'm going to come out of my timeline, and I'm going to go shader editor. And I'm going to get a nice view here of my candle. And I'm going to switch to rendered view. This is going to be Eevee is what we'll be using. And I'm going to come to the render tab. I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflections. I'm also going to click up here, and I'm going to turn off scene world. And I'm going to pick a nice interior HDRI. I'll turn up the world opacity so we can actually see it, but I'll turn the strength right down so it's kind of a dark room. And that'll help us just kind of plan things out. You can always get an HDR later and place it into your world right here, into the background shader. You can plug an environment texture into the color and you'll have the same effect, and you can be more specific about it. And it'll show up in your render. This one doesn't show up in renders. So this is more just for planning and getting things to look right. So I'm going to click on my flame and I'm going to click new to create a new material. Call this flame. And I'll just make things a little bit bigger. And I'm going to turn off my controls and everything just so it's a really clean view for me. Now, I'm going to come over here and go Shift A, and we're going to create a gradient texture, a color ramp, a texture coordinate node, and a mapping node. Now, these are the nodes we're going to use to drive this effect. So let's first set our gradient texture. We're going to take the factor and plug it into the factor here. Now, this is going to create a gradient on our flame object. If I just plug this straight into the emission, you'll see what it looks like. I can turn the emission up so it's a bit brighter. You see there's a little bit of a dark spot there, and then the rest of this is bright. So this is a gradient, and it's placing it here. It's the black, and it goes all the way to white. Now, it's just a linear gradient, so it's just like a black to white straight transition, just like the color ramp looks. Now, with the color ramp is going to let us change the color of this by mapping a different set of colors onto this factor. So I can come over here and set like a bit of like a dark red, and then come up here and make like a nice rich orange. And I can plug this into the emission now, and you can see it's the same pattern, but it's using these values. So that's how we can do that. Now the gradient texture is really useful, but it can be very difficult to place just right. It's a bit difficult just to get it into the right spot. So you have to fiddle with it a bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the generated and we're going to plug it into the vector, and the vector and plug it into the vector. So what does all this stuff do? This is a texture coordinate node. This is a node that's going to get basically the coordinates across the surface of our object to help explain to Blender how to place this gradient texture. This mapping node's not doing anything at the moment because all the values are set to 0 and the scale is set to 1. So we're just kind of passing through these coordinates. Think of like a map. We've got this map. We've picked the generated as the map. These are all different types of maps that have different interpretations of the surface. And we're piping those numbers through this mapping node, which isn't doing anything. And then we're putting that into the vector of the gradient node, which basically says, take the gradient texture, stick it onto this map. That's how we know how to place. If you also notice, it hasn't changed at all visually, and that's because by default, Blender is already using the generated texture coordinate. So if I unplug this, nothing's going to change. It's actually because what we've just created here is the default setup that's already at work, sort of behind the scenes. So by using this mapping node, we can now move these coordinates. We can move the map sort of, if you keep the gradient texture still and you move the map underneath it, we're just changing where we're placing it. But this is the part that can be a little bit fiddly, because what we can do, you see if I hold down Shift, I can move these values really slowly. And see there, I can move this gradient around. And you can see what we got. We've got this, if I move it forward to -0.5, it's going to cut my object in half. Now, if I take my rotation, I'm pretty sure on the Y is what I want to do. Yeah, you can see there. It's rotating in the way I want. I'm going to turn the Y to 90. And now I've got the gradient going up and down. Now I want to drop it. So I'm going to, because I've rotated on the Y, it's going to be the Y that will help me position it. So I'm going to hold down Shift and I will drag. Oh, I'm wrong. It's not moving. Let's try the Z. Still not. Let's try the X. Okay, there you go. It's the X. That's what I mean. It's a bit confusing. Anyways, you get there in the end. So I'm just going to position this so it's right around here maybe, and that looks pretty good. Now, what we're going to do as well is we're going to do some transparency, because if you look at a flame, usually down at the base it gets kind of transparent and it gets a bit more solid as it cools off towards the top. So I'm going to create another color ramp, and I'll drop it here. Let's just leave this one black and white. I'll take the factor, plug it in. And a reason why I'm using a color ramp, at the moment, by plugging the factor into this color ramp, I'm not actually doing anything to it because it's already a scale from black to white, right? And this color ramp isn't changing those values at all, so it's all the same. But I'm keeping it because I might later change the position of these pips, which will change the fall off, and I'm going to do the same on this one. And so this gives me that extra control which will begin to manipulate this factor. So I'm going to take this color and we're going to plug it into the alpha. Now, we need to do some more things to get this to work in Eevee. I'm going to go to Options, and under Blend Mode, instead of Opaque, I need to switch this to Alpha. We'll go Alpha Blend. And Shadow Mode, we're going to go Alpha Hashed. This will cause transparency to work in Eevee for this shader. So there we go. Now you can see, got it working nicely. Now, I could change the fall off by changing the scale in the X. So if I hold down Shift and change, nope, which scale is it? Oh, it's the Z. So if I decrease it, you can see that fall off grows and it decreases if I scale up. So I could go up like that and down. That's going to have the whole thing kind of, falling off, but I don't quite want that. I'm just going to bring it up a little bit, I think. Okay, great. Now I'm going to turn up the emission strength quite a bit, maybe to 10. That will give it a little bit of glow, make it look quite nice. Okay, you can see it's looking pretty good. All right, next we need to introduce some noise to this flame, and we're going to introduce it into the transparency. Okay, so we're going to create a noise texture and use that empty that we've already got traveling up into space. We're going to create a system that's going to create some moving noise. So we can keep our viewport playing so we can see the effect as we go. I'm going to go Shift A, Noise Texture, drop this here. And then I'm going to grab a, let's see, texture coordinate node. We actually just grab this one and hit Shift D. That will duplicate it. I'm going to take the object coordinate and put it into the vector. And what I want to do now is I'm actually going to affect this coordinate with this coordinate. Okay, so this is a little bit weird if you're not used to it, but if you picture this map that we've got, that we're telling Blender how to place this gradient texture, we're going to crumple the map. So we're going to actually distort this base layout, this texture coordinate, by using some numbers from another texture, so another noise texture. So if I grab a mix RGB, this is going to sort of mix the surface of this and this, which will create this noise. I'm going to take the generated and I will plug it into the top color, and I'll take the factor here and I'll plug it into this one. I could probably use the color as well, won't really make a difference. And we're going to mix them together. I'm going to turn the factor to 0 so it's not mixing at all yet. And I'll plug this into here so nothing should change. And now what I can do is hold down Shift and slowly drag this, and you'll see we start to get some breakup going on. Now let's drop the scale down. I'm going to make this quite small. And then we want to make it move. So it's sitting still at the moment, but because we're using the object coordinate, we can use this option here on the texture coordinate box to select an object to base the coordinates on. So just like before, we're going to click here and select the empty. That's going to make this move. So we can change that scale. You'll see what's going on there. That's changing the noise. And this effect is going to work really well if my factor is quite small. And what's good about this is that it's traveling at the same rate as the displacement. So it all kind of works together in a really cool way. All right, so to finish this off, let's select the candle, click New. This is going to be a very simple material. I'm just going to jump to it here. We'll turn off the subsurface all the way up to 1. And then what we can do is we can take the subsurface color, give it kind of like a nice little pinkish orange color. Might do the same with the base color. There we go. Turn the roughness down a little bit. Maybe the specular up. Looks pretty good. And then let's click the wick. We'll click New. And we're going to use a very similar system. So I'm going to click my candle actually, and I'm just going to grab my texture coordinate, my mapping, my gradient, and this color ramp here, and copy, Control C. Click on my curve, and I'll paste those. And I'll take the generated, and I'll pop it in here. And I'm just going to zero out the values that we changed. And I'm going to plug this into the emission. And I think I'll swap these. Just trying to get the tip to be glowy and not the base. So there we go. And I'll just turn this down to black, and then we can take this base color and make it black. And I'll take this tip here, turn up that saturation, and turn up our strength so it really starts to glow. I'm going to switch this to ease off of linear, and we'll just make it a little bit more of a nice gradient. And the last thing I'm going to do is actually put a light in the scene. So because all these emissive textures in Eevee, they don't actually emit any light. So we're not going to get any kind of light in the scene. So I'm going to go Shift A and I'm going to add in a point light. And I'm going to make sure it's sort of positioned right here where the flame is. And I just turn on my controls, you can see there. It's right where the flame is. And what I could do with that is I can come over here and I can give it a bit of an orange color to match the flame. Maybe turn it up a bit so it's nice and glowy. And then we can give it a bit of a flicker. There's a lot of ways to do this, but one of the easiest ways is to hit I to set a keyframe for the power, switch to the graph editor, go to modifiers over in the side panel. If you don't see it, just hit in, or you can click the little button there that pops it out. And if you select the power of the light, the thing that we just set that keyframe on, what we can click is add modifier and add noise. If you hit full stop to focus, you'll see the keys, and you can just zoom out a little bit. And what we want to do is find, I'm going to hold down Control on my middle mouse button to just change the zoom of my view. And we can change the strength, right, to make it go really bright and really dark. But you can see the values here. It's going up to like past 40 and just below 30. So it's never really getting too dim. So what I can do is hit G and Y, and this is actually going to grab that keyframe that we set at whatever 30 power and just drop it down lower and lower until these curves start to kind of touch 0 or get close to 0. Now you can start to see it flicker. I can change the scale and change the speed, and we can also change that strength. The thing is, I don't want it to go below 0. I want it to kind of sit above there. And there we go. Get this nice little candle effect. I can select all my objects here and then shift select the candle body. Last, hit Control P to parent and select Object Keep Transforms. And that'll parent everything into my candle. And then I can just rename these objects and wick and flame. There we go. Now it's really easy. I can just right click this, select hierarchy, Shift D to duplicate. And then I can grab and just move these guys around, maybe scale on Z a bit to create some cool effects. Oh yeah, I forgot. I need to add the point light as well into this. So there we go. Now I can right click, select hierarchy, Shift D, and just move. And there you go. That's how we can make fire really easily in Blender. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned a lot. If you did, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment down below. Let us know what kind of tutorials you'd like to see in the future. And don't forget to check out cgcookie.com. We've got a ton of amazing stuff there for you. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in the next tutorial. Until then, have a great week. See ya.